I never believed in ghosts until I fell in love with one. Now she won't let me go, and every night her icy touch reminds me that some loves are never meant to be. It was supposed to be a fresh start, a quiet escape from the chaos that had taken over my life. After a messy breakup and a city that never seemed to sleep, I wanted peace, something untouched, something real. That's how I found the old house, by the lake. The listing promised solitude, history, and a price far too low for such a place. I wasn't sure what I was getting into, but I didn't care. I packed my bags, left behind the noise and neon, and drove until the world grew silent. The road narrowed as I approached the town nearest to the lake, a place so small it barely appeared on maps. The trees thickened on both sides, their branches intertwining like the fingers of something ancient. The sun was dipping low, and a creeping fog began to rise off the water, curling around the trunks like ghostly fingers. It felt eerie, but beautiful, like a scene from an old movie or a forgotten dream. The house itself sat just a few feet from the water's edge, its paint peeling, windows dusty but intact. From the outside, it looked like it had been waiting for me, a relic frozen in time. I stepped onto the creaking porch and pushed the door open, the hinges groaning in protest. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of lavender and something else I couldn't name. Dust, memories, and maybe a trace of something lost long ago. The floors beneath my feet creaked as I explored room by room. There was a fireplace with a stack of dry wood, an old piano in the corner covered with a thin layer of dust, and faded wallpaper peeling at the corners. The whole house seemed to breathe with the weight of history. I felt like I was stepping into someone else's story, though no one had lived here for years. That first night was the hardest. The silence pressed in on me, so complete it became almost deafening. No cars passed by, no dogs barked, no radio hummed in the distance, just the quiet lapping of the lake against the shore. I told myself this was exactly what I wanted. No distractions, no noise. But as the hours passed, that silence began to feel heavy, like it was watching me back. Around midnight, I heard the first sound. Footsteps. Soft, deliberate steps on the wooden floor above me. I froze, heart pounding, telling myself it must be the house settling, or maybe an animal trapped somewhere. I hadn't unpacked anything upstairs yet, and the house was supposed to be empty. The sound stopped quickly, but my nerves did not calm. Stayed downstairs, trying to focus on a book, but my eyes kept darting to the staircase. Minutes felt like hours. Then, just as I was beginning to relax, the hallway light flickered violently and then went out, plunging me into darkness. In the quiet, I caught a faint scent, a delicate fragrance of roses, impossibly fresh. I looked around the rooms searching, but found no flowers, no vase, nothing that could explain the smell. Standing alone in the dark, I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Something wasn't right here. And then, as my eyes adjusted to the shadows, I saw her. She stood just at the foot of the staircase, pale, almost translucent, with long black hair falling over a white dress. Her eyes met mine, and in them, I saw a deep sadness, but also a strange softness. She didn't move or speak. She simply watched me, like she was waiting. Before I could blink, she was gone, just vanished into the shadows, as if she had never been there at all. I sat down heavily, trying to steady my breath. Maybe I was exhausted, or maybe the isolation was playing tricks on me. I told myself ghosts weren't real, that I was imagining things, that this old house was just old. But, deep down, something told me I was wrong. Something in the way the air shifted after she disappeared, in the lingering scent of roses, in the weight of those sorrowful eyes. The house wasn't just a building. It was alive with her presence, and I was no longer alone. The second night brought no relief from the strange unease settling over the house. In fact, it felt more intense, almost as if the boundary between waking and dreaming was thinning. Exhausted but restless, I finally drifted into a deep sleep, only to find myself pulled into a world more vivid and haunting than any dream I had ever experienced. I was standing in the master bedroom again, the same room where I'd seen her silhouette the night before. Moonlight poured through the tall windows, casting silver patterns on the worn wooden floor. There she was, dressed in a flowing white gown that seemed to glow softly, her hair cascading like a dark waterfall down her back. She stood perfectly, still, her eyes fixed somewhere beyond me, lost in a sorrow I could almost touch. This time, she looked at me directly. Her eyes were deep pools of sadness, but not empty or cold. There was something aching, almost desperate. I couldn't speak, but I felt her presence surround me, filling the room with a quiet, sorrowful warmth. She didn't say a word, but I sensed that she was trying to tell me something urgent and fragile. Night after night, the dreams repeated. Sometimes she would stand by the window, her gaze distant yet longing. Other times, she would be closer, her hand reaching out, brushing against my arm or my cheek in a touch so gentle it sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't frightening. It was strangely comforting, as if she was offering solace to a loneliness I hadn't fully acknowledged in myself. I started to recognize patterns in the dreams. She was always waiting for something or someone. Her expression was never angry or vengeful. Instead, it was mournful and soft, as if she carried the weight of a heartbreak too heavy to bear. Over time, I began to feel like I belonged there with her, in that silent room bathed in moonlight. With each dream, her presence grew stronger. Her whispers were no longer silent thoughts, but soft sounds, almost like a melody carried on the breeze. Sometimes I would wake with her name echoing faintly in my ears. "Daniel," she would call, her voice barely more than a breath but full of longing. The sound lingered long after I opened my eyes. One night I dreamt she was closer than ever before. She stood at the edge of my bed, her hand hovering just above my chest. The air turned cold, but not unpleasantly so. It was refreshing, like a breath of fresh mountain air in the dead of winter. She smiled, a small, sad smile that reached her eyes. Then she whispered, "You feel it too, don't you? You're mine now." I jolted awake, my heart pounding in my chest. The room was still dark, the shadows thick, but I could swear I felt her presence beside me, watching, waiting. I reached out my hand, but only cold air met my fingertips. Despite the fear that should have gripped me, I felt no urge to run. Instead, I found myself drawn deeper into the mystery of this woman who haunted my nights and filled my dreams. I began to anticipate her visits, craving the strange comfort they brought, even as they unsettled me. Days passed, and the line between reality and dreams blurred. I found myself talking aloud in the empty rooms, telling her my thoughts and fears. I confessed secrets I'd buried deep within, my regrets, my hopes, my loneliness. And though no one answered, I felt her listening, as if she were a silent guardian of my soul. The house no longer felt empty. It was filled with her spirit, her essence, her story. And with each night, my own story intertwined with hers, weaving a bond that neither of us fully understood yet. As the nights grew longer and the dreams more vivid, something within me began to change. What started as curiosity and quiet fascination evolved into something deeper, a connection that was impossible to ignore. I found myself yearning not only to see her, but to understand her, to reach out beyond the veil that separated our worlds. She was no longer just a ghostly figure in the shadows. She became a presence I could feel with every fiber of my being. Sometimes, when I sat alone in the living room or wandered through the old house, I would catch subtle signs of her closeness. A faint brush of cold air on my skin, the softest, whisper of her voice, or the gentle scent of roses lingering in the air. These moments were both beautiful and unsettling, like touching something precious but fragile. I began talking to her aloud, at first as if she were a friend, then as someone I trusted with my most private thoughts. I told her about my life, my failures, my fears. I told her about the heartbreak that led me here and the loneliness that still gnawed at my soul. And though she never spoke back in words, I felt her listening. I felt her presence growing warmer, more tangible. One night, as the wind howled outside and the old house creaked beneath the weight of time, she finally reached out, not just in dreams, but in a moment that blurred the lines between sleep and waking. I was sitting by the window when I felt a hand, icy yet gentle, touch my cheek. I turned slowly and saw her standing there, more real than ever before. Her eyes met mine, and in that moment, I understood everything. She was reaching for me, inviting me to cross a boundary I didn't even realize existed. Her story came to me in flashes, memories that weren't mine, but that I could somehow see and feel. She had lived a century ago, a young woman named Eliza, whose life was cut short by heartbreak and tragedy. A love torn apart by war, a promise broken, a night by the lake that changed everything. Her spirit had lingered here, trapped between worlds, waiting for someone who could see her, who could love her. The more I learned, the more I felt my own heart tethered to hers. I began to see her not as a spectre or a ghost, but as a person, flawed, vulnerable, aching for connection. Our conversations grew longer, even if one-sided, and I started to imagine what it would be like if she were alive, if I could hold her hand or hear her laugh. I knew it was impossible. I knew that love like this belonged to stories, to myths, but my heart refused to listen. Every night, I waited for her. Every morning, I woke hoping to find traces of her presence, still lingering in the room. I fell in love with her, not with the idea of a ghost, but with Eliza herself, the woman who had loved, who had lost, who had waited so long for someone to remember her. It was a love that defied logic and reason, a love that existed in shadows and whispers. And when she finally touched my hand fully, cold, translucent, but undeniably there, I felt a surge of emotion I hadn't known I was capable of. It was a promise, a binding, a connection that neither time nor death could break. It was both beautiful and terrifying. I was no longer just a man, living in an old house by a lake. I was a part of her story now, tangled in a love that crossed worlds. And as much as I wanted to believe this was some strange blessing, a chance to be loved in a way I had never been before, there was a part of me that knew this love came with a price I was only beginning to understand. The deeper our connection grew, the more complicated everything became. At first, the presence of Eliza was a secret comfort, a light in the darkness of my loneliness. But soon, the reality of what we shared began to weigh on me, blurring the lines between love and something darker, something I couldn't fully control. Her visits became more frequent and intense. During the day, the house felt alive with her energy. Soft footsteps echoed through the hallways, whispers danced just beyond hearing, and shadows shifted where no light should fall. I found small tokens she left behind. A wilted rose on the windowsill, a folded piece of old lace, the faint scent of lavender on my clothes. Each gift was a reminder that she was always there, watching, waiting. At night, she became more than a dream. Sometimes, as I lay in bed, I felt her beside me, a cold presence that comforted and unsettled me all at once. She would trace patterns on my skin with her fingers, her touch icy but strangely soothing. Her voice, soft and melodic, would fill the room with whispered promises and sweet confessions of a love that had transcended time. But with love came possessiveness. I began to notice the subtle shifts in her behavior, the way her eyes would darken when I spoke of leaving, or when someone else's name crossed my lips. It was as if she feared losing me, and yet I was the one trapped, caught between the living world and her ghostly realm. One evening, I made the mistake of telling her I needed to go into town. I thought it was harmless, just a brief trip to buy supplies. But the moment I stepped outside, a chill swept over me like a warning. When I returned, the house was colder than ever, and Eliza's sorrow was palpable. She didn't speak, but her silence was louder than words. Later that night, she appeared at the foot of my bed, eyes blazing with a fierce intensity I hadn't seen before. She whispered, "You belong here, with me." I realized then that this love was not like any other. It wasn't free or easy. It was binding, consuming, a force that demanded all of me. The more I tried to resist, the tighter her hold became. I felt her presence in every shadow, heard her voice in every breeze. I was no longer alone, but I was no longer free. Despite the growing fear, I couldn't walk away. There was something in her loneliness that mirrored my own, a shared longing that connected us across the divide between life and death. I wanted to save her, to free her from whatever held her here. But every attempt only seemed to deepen her attachment to me, and mine to her. The nights grew darker, and the boundary between our worlds thinner. Sometimes, I would wake to find her standing by the window, gazing out at the lake with tears that shimmered like starlight. Other times, I caught glimpses of her in mirrors, her reflection flickering like a candle flame. My friends noticed the change in me. I was more withdrawn, haunted by sleepless nights and strange stories I couldn't explain. I told myself I wasn't losing my mind, that this was just a chapter of grief and healing. But deep down, I feared I was becoming something else. A prisoner of a love that transcended mortality, trapped in a haunting I couldn't escape. And then one night she told me what I had feared all along. "I can never leave this place," she said, voice trembling. "But you can choose to stay, with me." The choice lay before me, a life alone in the world of the living, or eternity bound to a love that was as beautiful as it was terrifying. I didn't know what I would choose, only that I was already caught in her world, and the line between love and captivity was thinner than I ever imagined. As the days stretched on, I found myself pulled deeper into Eliza's world, a realm where time felt fluid and reality warped around her presence. Our connection, once fragile and tentative, had become a bond neither of us could break. It was a love that existed beyond the limits of life and death, a love forged in shadows and whispered secrets. Despite the intensity of our bond, the loneliness in her eyes never fully faded. There were moments when the weight of her existence pressed down on both of us, a reminder that she was trapped, forever tied to this house and the memories that lingered within its walls. She longed to be free, but the forces that bound her were stronger than either of us. Our days blended into nights, and I found myself living in a strange twilight zone, partly in the world of the living, partly in the spectral realm she inhabited. I would spend hours exploring the house, searching for clues about her past, piecing together the fragments of a life that had ended too soon. Each discovery brought us closer, but also deepened the mystery of why she stayed. Eliza showed me parts of her story through fleeting visions, moments of happiness, sorrow, and betrayal. I saw her laughing in a sunlit garden, holding hands with a man whose face I could never quite make out. I saw the heartbreak in her eyes when that love was ripped away, leaving her stranded between worlds. These glimpses made her more real to me, more human, and I found myself loving her not just as a ghost, but as a woman who had lived, loved, and lost. Yet with that love came a growing fear. I realized that Eliza's presence was more than just a haunting. It was a tether that threatened to pull me into her world forever. The house no longer felt like a refuge, but a prison, and the lake outside, once serene, now seemed like a boundary I could never cross. One evening, I asked her what she wanted from me, what she hoped for beyond this endless waiting. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, but filled with aching hope. "I want to be remembered," she said, "to be loved truly and completely, so that I can finally find peace." I wanted to promise her that I would stay, that I would love her forever, but part of me knew that such a love came at a terrible cost. Loving a ghost meant embracing the unknown, accepting a reality where the lines between life and death presence and absence, were forever blurred. As days turned into weeks, I began to notice how her influence extended beyond the house. Friends who visited commented on the strange chill that settled in the air, the fleeting glimpses of a woman in white just beyond their sight. I felt torn between two worlds, one anchored in reality, the other in the ethereal pull of Eliza's love. The more I gave myself to her, the more the living world faded. I stopped answering calls, missed appointments, and withdrew from the life I had once known. The house had become a sanctuary and a trap, a place where love and longing intertwined with fear and uncertainty. Still, every night, Eliza would come, to me, not just in dreams, but in moments that felt like magic. She would hold me close, her touch cold but comforting. We would talk without words, sharing a connection deeper than anything I had ever experienced. It was a love story written in silence and shadow, a romance born from tragedy but pulsing with life. And though I knew this love was fragile and fleeting, I couldn't turn away. I was caught in the spell of a ghost who had become my everything, and I was powerless to resist. The final realization settled in slowly, but with undeniable force. I was no longer living my own life alone. Eliza was with me in every moment, her presence a constant companion that both comforted and confined me. The lines between the living world and the ghostly realm had blurred beyond distinction, and I understood that this love was a binding that would shape the rest of my existence. I began to notice how the house itself seemed to respond to her emotions. When she was calm and at peace, the rooms felt warm and inviting, bathed in a soft glow that made the air hum with quiet life. But when her sadness crept in, the temperature dropped, shadows lengthened, and the silence grew heavy. The house was a living extension of her spirit, reflecting her every mood, her every longing. Despite the eerie nature of our connection, I found myself adapting to this new reality. I learned to navigate the delicate balance between the tangible world around me and the spectral presence that filled my days and nights. I spoke to her as if she were flesh and blood, sharing my hopes, fears, and dreams. And in return, I felt her love surround me, silent, unwavering, and eternal. Yet, with this closeness came a profound loneliness. How could I explain this love to anyone who hadn't seen her, who hadn't felt the cold brush of her hand or heard her whispered words? I was isolated, trapped in a world that existed just beyond the reach of others, a prisoner of a love that defied logic and reason. I wondered what the future held for us. Could love truly cross the boundary of death? Or was I condemning myself to a life suspended between two worlds? The question haunted me as much as the memories that filled the old house. One night, as the moonlight spilled through the windows, Eliza appeared more vividly than ever before. She reached out, her fingers grazing my cheek, and I felt the weight of her love and sorrow intertwine. She whispered that she wanted me to be happy, to live fully, but that part of her would always remain tethered here, to the house, to the memories, to the unfinished story that bound her spirit to this world. Realized then that our love was both a gift and a curse. It was a connection that transcended time, but it also carried a price. The sacrifice of normalcy, the acceptance of loneliness, and the constant presence of a world unseen by others. Still, I couldn't let go. I was drawn to her, to the mystery and magic of a love that existed in shadows and silence. It was a love that had saved me from despair, but had also chained me to a fate I could not escape. In the quiet moments between night and day, I often find myself reaching for her, hoping to touch the warmth behind her ghostly presence. And even, though I know she is not truly alive, and I am no longer truly alone, I am grateful for the love we share. A love that defies death, a love that refuses to let go.